I thought it was just another careless text about being late. But 10 minutes later, I realized the leftovers were not the turkey or the stuffing. They were me. As soon as I hit send on my reply, the entire dining room went dead silent. My family froze, looking at me like I was a stranger they had lost the manual for. That was the moment I stopped being their spare part and started being their problem. My name is Brittany Hale. At 33 years old, I managed multi-million-dollar logistics chains for a company called Harborline Metrics. I lived in a charming, breezy apartment in a coastal town just outside Savannah where the moss hung heavy on the oaks and the salt air cleared my head. I paid my own bills, fixed my own flat tires, and generally functioned as a highly productive member of society. Yet, the moment my tires crunched onto the gravel of my father's driveway, I reverted to being a 12-year-old girl who could not do anything right. Driving home for the holidays was not a choice I made out of joy. It was a strategic maneuver to avoid the alternative. If I stayed away, my phone would blow up with guilt-tripping voicemails about how I was abandoning the family unit and how I was too selfish to spare a single day for the people who raised me. So, I packed my bag, put on the beige sweater Kendra liked because it was modest, and drove 2 hours inland to play the role of the grateful daughter. I walked into the new house my dad, Wade, had bought with his wife, Kendra, last year. It was one of those sprawling suburban builds that looked impressive from the street with its manicured lawn and pillars, but felt hollow on the inside. The air smelled of pine needles and expensive catering. Brittany. Kendra glided toward me. She was wearing a red silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. You made it. We were worried you would get stuck in traffic. Or just get lost. I have GPS, Kendra, I said, trying to keep my smile fixed in place. Of course. She patted my arm, her nails digging in slightly through the wool of my sweater. But you know how you get distracted. We just worry about you living all the way out there alone. That was the narrative. Brittany was scattered. Brittany was unstable. Brittany needed guidance. Brittany needed her family to steer her life because she was incapable of navigating it herself. It did not matter that I led a team of 15 people. To them, I was still the girl who needed her dad to co-sign a lease 10 years ago. The living room was full of people. Some were distant cousins I barely recognized. Others were business associates of my father. The mantelpiece was crowded with framed photos. I noticed a distinct lack of photos featuring me, except for one from high school, where I looked particularly awkward with braces. Then I saw the card. It was propped up right in the center of the display, nestled between pine cones and silver baubles. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with Brittany written on the front in elegant, looping cursive. I frowned. That was not my handwriting. It was not my dad's blocky scrawl, and it was too fluid to be Kendra's sharp spikes. I picked it up. It smelled of heavy floral perfume, a scent I did not wear. It felt heavy, official. Before I could open it, Kendra appeared at my elbow and plucked it from my fingers. Not yet, sweetie, she cooed, her voice dropping a decibel so the guests wouldn't hear the edge in it. We are saving the best surprises for later. You should be grateful we put so much thought into your future. My future? I asked, feeling a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Just go say hi to your brother. She deflected. Miles, my stepbrother, was currently thrusting his phone into people's faces. He was 25 and arguably the most online person I knew. Yo, Brit, he yelled, swinging the camera around. Say hey to the followers' family reunion time. Look at how happy we are. He shoved the lens inches from my nose. I flinched and tried to step back. Miles, please, I said, turning my face away. Come on, do not be a downer, he sneered, lowering the phone but keeping the recording running. Mom says we need to show unity. Just smile or something. I felt trapped. The walls seemed to be inching closer. I looked over at my dad to see if he would intervene. Wade was sitting in his leather armchair, swirling a glass of scotch. He looked tired. His phone was resting on the arm of the chair, and it kept buzzing. Buzz! 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 He would glance at the screen, his eyes darting side to side, and then immediately flip it face down. He looked like a man expecting a bomb to go off. "Dad," I called out softly. He jumped. "Everything is fine. Brittany, just work. Always work." The atmosphere was suffocating. Kendra was holding court near the tree, telling a story to a neighbor about how she saved me from a bad investment last year, a story that was a total fabrication. Miles was narrating his life for strangers on the internet. My dad looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. I needed air, or water, or perhaps a very strong vodka. "I am going to get a drink," I muttered to no one in particular. I escaped into the kitchen. It was an island of cool granite and stainless steel, momentarily empty of guests. I leaned against the counter and took a deep breath, trying to slow my heart rate. I poured a glass of water from the fridge dispenser. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a work email or a text from a friend asking if I survived the first hour. The notification popped up on the lock screen. It was a text from Dad. My brows furrowed. Dad was sitting in the living room, 30 feet away. I unlocked the phone to read the full message. "Heat up the leftovers?" I stared at the screen until the pixels seemed to blur. My thumb hovered over the glass, trembling just slightly. It had to be a mistake, a delayed message from hours ago. That was the only logical explanation, because my father was sitting less than 20 feet away from me. I leaned out of the kitchen archway, peering into the living room. Dad was still in his armchair. His hands were wrapped tightly around his glass of scotch, knuckles white, staring blankly at the fireplace. His phone was nowhere near his hands. It was not on his lap. It was not on the armrest anymore. A cold chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty window. If Dad was not holding his phone, someone else was. I stepped back into the kitchen before anyone could spot me staring. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I needed a secure location. I slipped into the laundry room adjacent to the pantry and clicked the lock shut. The air inside smelled of artificial lavender and dryer lint. I leaned my back against the washing machine and slid down until I was sitting on the cold tile floor. With shaking fingers, I swiped down on my control center and hit the screen recording button. The little red dot appeared in the corner. Evidence. I needed to capture everything. I opened the message thread and typed, "Which leftovers?" The 3 gray dots of a typing bubble appeared instantly. Whoever had the phone was waiting for me. The reply came through with a ping that sounded deafening in the small room. "Your portion? Don't make a scene. Heat it up. Then come eat like an adult." I read the text twice. The breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. Leftovers. That was it. That was the code. It was not about the turkey or the ham. It was about me. To them, I was the thing kept in the back of the fridge, cold and unappealing, dragged out only when the table looked too empty or when they needed to keep up appearances of a full family spread. I was the leftover child from a marriage Dad wanted to forget, reheated to serve the image of his perfect new life. I stood up, anger replacing the fear. I unlocked the door and cracked it open just an inch. Through the sliver of space, I had a direct line of sight to the sofa where Kendra sat. She was perfectly poised, her legs crossed at the ankles. In her left hand, she held her own sleek smartphone. In her right hand, resting casually on her thigh, was a bulky phone with a worn leather case. My father's phone. She looked down at the screen, typed something quickly with a smirk playing on her lips, and then set it face down on the cushion beside her. She looked up and caught Miles's eye, giving him a small, conspiratorial nod. My stomach turned. She was texting me from 2 rooms away, pretending to be my father, just to see if I would obey, just to see if I would be the good little girl and microwave my own dignity. I was about to storm out there when my phone vibrated again. A banner notification dropped down from the top of the screen. It was not a text. It was an email. From Harborline Metrics HR automated system, subject urgent change to direct deposit information request. I frowned. I had not requested any changes. I tapped the notification, my fingers moving on autopilot. The email opened, displaying the standard corporate template. We have received a request to update your primary banking account for payroll distribution. Per security protocol, a confirmation link has been sent to the recovery email on file. I scrolled down to see which email address they had sent the link to. The blood drained from my face. Confirmation, sent to Hale Family, Maine. I had not used that email address in 7 years. It was the shared family account Kendra had set up when I was in college, the one she insisted we all use for transparency before I moved out and cut financial ties. I had removed it from my work profile the day I was hired. Or so I thought. The pieces clicked together with a sickening sound in my head. The insistent questions about my job, the comments about me being unstable, the way Dad looked terrified. They were not just emotionally manipulating me this time. They were accessing my payroll portal. They were trying to reroute my salary. I lowered the phone. My reflection in the dark window of the washing machine looked pale, ghostly. I could walk out there and scream. I could throw the phone at Kendra's perfectly coiffed head. I could demand answers. But that is exactly what the unstable Brittany would do. That is what the leftovers would do, make a mess that they would just wipe up and throw away. No! I stopped the screen recording and saved the video. I took a screenshot of the email. Then I slid the phone into my back pocket. I reached up and smoothed my hair. I rubbed my cheeks to bring some color back into them. I unlocked the laundry room door and stepped out. I walked through the kitchen, grabbed a plate, and put on the widest, most docile smile I could muster. I was not going to be the leftovers anymore. I was going to be the chef, and I was about to serve them a dish they would never forget. Dinner unfolded like a poorly rehearsed stage play, where everyone knew their lines but nobody believed them. The roast beef was dry, the wine was too sweet, and the conversation felt like a minefield. I sat between an aunt, who kept asking why I was still single, and Miles, who was busy editing his footage under the table. Every time I lifted my fork, I felt 3 pairs of eyes, Dad's, Kendra's, and Miles's tracking the movement, waiting for me to break character. "You look tired, Brittany," Kendra said, slicing into her potatoes with surgical precision. "It must be exhausting, driving back and forth, managing that little apartment all by yourself. You know, if you moved back into the guest wing, imagine the rent you would save. It is practically throwing money away, living in that box." "I like my box," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I can afford it." "For now," she murmured, taking a sip of wine. "But markets change. Security is an illusion. We just want you safe." My father cleared his throat, the sound wet and nervous. He refused to meet my eyes, focusing instead on the centerpiece. "Kendra's right, honey," he said. Well, I just wanted to make sure things were tidy for you. I went ahead and helped you sort out some paperwork, just to keep things streamlined." "Paperwork?" I asked, my grip tightening on my steak knife. "What kind of paperwork? Dad, I did not ask for help." "Just administrative things," he mumbled, waving a hand vaguely. "Boring stuff. Do not worry your pretty head about it." I scanned the table. Near the center, partially obscured by a silver-tiered tray holding the Christmas log cake, I saw the corner of a thick manila envelope. It had Brittany, financials scrawled on it in black marker. It had been shoved under the platter, hidden in plain sight, like they planned to present it to me over dessert as a fait accompli. Miles, who had been relatively quiet, suddenly looked up from his phone, a piece of roast beef hanging off his fork. "Yeah, you should be thanking them, Britt," he slurred slightly, clearly having spiked his eggnog. "Mom totally crushed it. She handled that salary stuff for you so you do not have to stress about the transfer. Serious boss moves." The silence that followed was absolute. Kendra's head snapped toward Miles so fast I thought her neck would crack. Her eyes were wide, burning with a warning that could freeze water. "Miles," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "eat your dinner." "What?" Miles blinked, looking between us. "I just meant, you know, we are discussing the turkey," Kendra interrupted, her smile returning like a switch had been flipped, though it did not reach her eyes. Not business. I froze. I stared at my plate, my heart thudding against my ribs. Handled that salary stuff, the automated email from Harborline Metrics, the request to change my direct deposit, the text message from Dad's phone telling me to heat up the leftovers. It wasn't just interference, it was theft. A memory clawed its way up from the back of my mind, something I had buried deep. Sophomore year of college, Wade had told me he would manage my tuition payments to help me focus on my studies. I had been so grateful. 6 months later, I found out the management involved taking out a $20,000 private loan in my name, one I had never signed for, while he used the cash I sent him to pay off his own credit card debt. I spent 5 years paying off that loan. I looked at them now. Dad, weak and averted. Kendra, calculating and cold. Miles, the useful idiot. They did not just want to control my life choices. They did not just want me to move home so they could play happy family. They were broke, or they were greedy, or both. And they viewed my salary, my stability, not as my achievement, but as a resource they were entitled to harvest. I was not a daughter to them. I was an asset. I was a line of credit. Rage, hot and blinding, flared in my chest. But I forced it down. If I screamed now, if I flipped the table and demanded answers, they would gaslight me. They would call me hysterical. They would say I was making a scene in front of the guests and use it as proof that I was mentally unfit to handle my own finances. I needed that envelope. I needed to see exactly what paperwork Dad had signed. You are right, Kendra, I said, lifting my glass. My hand did not shake. Family is everything. I am just overwhelmed by how much you all do for me. Kendra relaxed, her shoulders dropping an inch. She thought she had won. She thought the leftovers were back in the fridge, cooling down. That is all we ever wanted. Brittany, she smiled. I am going to finish this delicious meal, I said, slicing a piece of meat. And then, maybe we can look at that paperwork later. I'm sure it is all for the best. I put the food in my mouth. It tasted like ash, but I chewed and I swallowed, and I watched the envelope under the cake tray, planning exactly how I was going to take them down. I left my father's house at dawn, claiming I had an early meeting, but the truth was I needed to get back to my fortress. I drove the 2 hours to the coast in silence, my mind replaying the dinner, the text, and the hidden envelope. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the air felt stale. I dropped my keys in the bowl and froze. My apartment is minimal. Everything has a place. But the second drawer of my filing cabinet, the one where I kept my tax returns and bank statements, was not fully closed. It was jutting out by a fraction of an inch. I walked over and pulled it open. The hanging folders were compressed too tightly, as if someone had pulled a file out and shoved it back in without checking the alignment. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. They had been here. They had a key. I went to the kitchen counter where I kept my incoming mail. There was a letter from my bank, the one I used for my savings. The envelope looked normal at a glance, but when I ran my thumb along the seal, the paper felt rough. It had been steamed open and glued back shut with a cheap adhesive stick. I ripped it open. Inside was a third-party access authorization form. At the bottom, in blue ink, was my signature. What on earth? I whispered, tracing the lines. It looked like my signature, but the pressure points were wrong. The loops were hesitant, lacking the speed of my natural hand. It was a tracing. Someone had put a light behind a document I had actually signed, laid this form over it, and drawn my name. I grabbed my phone and dialed the HR department at Harborline Metrics. It was 8:30 in the morning, and my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard fury. Payroll, this is Sarah, the voice chirped. Sarah, this is Brittany Hale, employee ID 492. I need to know if there have been any changes to my direct deposit information in the last 48 hours. There was the sound of typing. Oh, yes, Ms. Hale. We processed your request on Friday afternoon. The switch to the new credit union account is pending for the pay cycle on the 30th. I did not make that request, I said, my voice dropping to a steel register. But we verified it, Sarah stammered. We called the emergency contact number on file to confirm the identity since the request came via email. The gentleman confirmed your social security number and the amount of your last raise. Which number did you call? I asked. The secondary contact ending in 8800. It was added to your profile last November. That was my father's business cell phone. I had never added it. Sarah, listen to me very carefully, I said. That was a fraudulent call. I need you to freeze that change immediately. Do not trigger any alerts that might notify the requester. Can you do that? Yes. I will flag it for fraud investigation right now. Oh my God. Brittany, are you okay? I am fine. Sarah, just freeze it. I hung up. They had been planning this for months. They had planted the number, waited for the holidays, and made their move when they knew I would be distracted. I needed absolute proof. I needed to know if they were just desperate or if they were actively monitoring me right now. I sat down at my laptop. I opened my current work email and composed a new message to the old family email address, the one Kendra monitored. Subject urgent, performance bonus confirmation. Body forwarding this to my personal archive. Just received confirmation that the end-of-year performance bonus of $15,000 will be processed next week. Need to decide where to allocate the funds. I hit send. Then I logged into the admin panel for that old family email account, which I still had administrative access to from when I set it up 10 years ago. I went to the security tab and watched the active sessions log. 1 hour passed, then 2. At exactly 11:15 in the morning, the log refreshed. New login detected. IP address 192.168.1.14 location residential broadband. Pine Creek suburbs. That was Wade's house. 3 minutes later, the email I had sent was marked as read. They took the bait. They saw $15,000 and they could probably taste it. I did not scream. I did not cry. I took a screenshot of the login log. I took a picture of the forged bank form. I downloaded the chat log with Sarah from HR confirming the fraudulent call. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved from a networking event years ago. Law Office of Marcus Dean. A receptionist answered. Hi, I said. I need to book a consultation with Mr. Dean regarding a civil case involving identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery. The perpetrators are immediate family members. I have the evidence, and I want to know how to bury them. Marcus Dean leaned back in his leather chair, tapping a pen against the file I had placed on his desk. The office was quiet, insulated from the city noise by thick glass. You have a solid case for identity theft and wire fraud, Marcus said, his voice dry and devoid of pity. The bank form with the traced signature, the unauthorized access to your HR portal, the IP logs leading to your father's residence. If we file a police report today, they will likely be brought in for questioning within 48 hours. I looked at the documents. It would be so easy. One signature from me, and the flashing lights would descend on that perfect suburban lawn. But that felt too clean, too quick. No police yet, I said. I do not just want them arrested. Marcus, if I arrest them, they play the victim. They tell the family I am a vindictive daughter punishing her aging father. I want them to admit it. I want to strip away the facade before the handcuffs go on. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Dangerous game. Brittany, if they get desperate, they could escalate. You need to lock down your life first. I took his advice. That afternoon, my friend Tessa came over. Tessa was a former colleague from Harborline who now worked in cybersecurity. She did not ask questions. She just worked. Within 3 hours, she had installed a camera doorbell, set up a locking mailbox, and helped me migrate every single one of my accounts to a new encrypted password manager. You realize this is not just opportunistic, right? Tessa asked, looking at the log of login attempts on my old email. They have been pinging your accounts for years. Just checking balances, watching, waiting for a number big enough to be worth the grab. That night, my phone rang. It was Wade. I let it ring 3 times before answering, putting it on speaker so Tessa could hear. Brittany! His voice sounded shaky, breathless. Listen, honey, do not pay attention to Kendra. You know how she gets. She is just high-strung. We only want what is best for you. I know, Dad, I said, keeping my voice flat. I am just tired. Right, he rushed on. Hey, did that bonus come through? The one you emailed about? I looked at Tessa. She rolled her eyes and made a gagging motion. I do not know, I lied. I checked the account this morning, but I did not see it. Maybe there was a glitch with the transfer. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and pregnant. A glitch! Wade's voice sharpened, losing the fatherly wobble. That is odd. Did you call the bank? Sometimes pending transactions get held up if the routing number is new. He caught himself. But it was too late. He knew about a new routing number because he or Kendra had tried to input it. I will check tomorrow, I said. Why do you need money? Dad. No, he stammered. Just financial literacy. Want to make sure you are on top of it. He hung up. The mask had slipped. He was not the battered husband afraid of his wife. He was her partner. He was the lookout. 5 minutes later, my phone pinged with a message from Miles. Bro, Mom is freaking out. She is tearing the office apart looking for some file. Just chill out with the questions. Okay, don't make a scene. Attached to the message was a photo he must have snapped in the chaos. It showed a piece of notebook paper lying on Kendra's desk. It was yellowed with age. At the top, in Kendra's handwriting, it said, Brittany's keys. Below it was a list, my first AOL password, my college student ID pin. The answer to my security question about my first pet. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. This was not a sudden desperation. This was a long con. Kendra had been harvesting my data since I was a teenager, keeping a dossier on me like a farmer keeps records on livestock. They were waiting for me to fatten up so they could slaughter me for cash. They did not raise me, I whispered to the empty room. They groomed me. I deleted the text thread, but saved the photo. I was not going to let them fade away. I was not going to let them spin a story about how I abandoned them. The annual Hale family post-Christmas party was in 2 days. Everyone would be there. The neighbors, the business partners, the distant relatives who thought Wade Hale was a saint. Tessa, I said, standing up. I need you to help me prepare a presentation. I am going to give them exactly what they want. I am going to give them a show. The invitation to Aunt Clara's post-Christmas dinner was couched in the language of peace, but I knew it was an ambush. Kendra wanted a public reconciliation, a stage where she could parade me around to the extended family and cement the narrative that I was the wayward daughter returning to the fold. I agreed to go, but I did not dress for a party. I dressed for a deposition. I wore a sharp black blazer and carried a clutch that held nothing but my phone and folded copies of 3 very specific documents. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, while I was parking my car down the street from Aunt Clara's crowded driveway, I sent my father a text. I will hear the truth from you tonight. When I walked into the living room, Wade looked like he had not slept in a week. He was holding a glass of punch with a trembling hand, his eyes darting toward the exit every few seconds. Kendra, by contrast, was radiant. She rushed over, hooking her arm through mine, beaming at the room full of aunts, uncles, and cousins. Look who made it, she announced, her voice pitching up. Our busy professional found time for family after all. I smiled, a tight, thin expression that did not show teeth. I would not miss this for the world. The evening followed Kendra's script perfectly until the toast. She gathered everyone in the living room, dimming the lights to project a slideshow of family photos onto the white wall above the fireplace. It was a montage of Li's vacations where they argued the whole time, graduation photos where they complained about the seating. "We are so blessed," Kendra said, dabbing at a dry eye. "Brittany, darling, why don't you say a few words about family traditions?" She handed me the floor, expecting a mumbled platitude. I stepped into the light of the projector. The beam hit my face, blinding me slightly, but I could see the silhouette of my father shrinking into the sofa. "Family traditions," I began, my voice clear and steady. "We have a new one this year. It is a story about leftovers. You know, the food you push to the back of the fridge, the things you only pull out when you are desperate." The room went quiet. The air grew thick. "See, I used to think I was a member of this family," I continued. "But 3 days ago, I learned I was actually just a meal ticket, something to be consumed." "Oh, Brittany, stop being so dramatic," Kendra laughed, though the sound was brittle. "It is just a joke, everyone. She has such a dark sense of humor." "Is it?" I asked. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had already cast the screen to the smart TV behind me, overriding Kendra's slideshow. With a single tap, the video recording I made in the laundry room began to play. The text message appeared on the 60-inch screen, looming over the guests. "Heat up the leftovers." Then my reply. Then the response from my father's phone, sent while he was sitting 10 feet away from me in the video. "Your portion. Do not make a scene. Heat it up, then come eat like an adult." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Aunt Clara put a hand to her mouth. "That is private," Kendra hissed, stepping forward. "Turn that off." "I am not done," I said, my voice cutting through her protest like a blade. I swiped the screen. The next image was the email from Harborline Metrics HR, displayed in high definition. "This is a request to divert my entire paycheck to a new bank account," I explained to the stunned room. "An account I do not own." A request made by someone pretending to be me, confirmed by a phone call from my father's number. I swiped again. The forged bank authorization form appeared. The shaky, traced signature, magnified for everyone to analyze. "And this," I said, pointing to the screen, "is a felony." I turned away from the crowd and looked directly at my father. He was slumped in the chair, his face gray, looking like a man whose entire world had just dissolved. "Dad," I said softly, "did you know?" The silence stretched out, agonizing and heavy. Every eye in the room turned to Wade Hale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Kendra, then at me, and his shoulders collapsed. Wade stammered, tears welling in his eyes. I told her it was too risky. I told her." "Shut up!" Kendra shrieked, her poise shattering instantly. She lunged at Wade, grabbing his arm. "Don't you dare!" "After everything I did to keep this house floating, you ungrateful little..." She spun on me, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. "You are betraying this family," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "We fed you. We raised you. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," I said, watching as my aunts and uncles took unconscious steps away from her, their expressions shifting from confusion to disgust. "And as of this morning, neither does the bank." The drive back to my apartment felt like floating through deep water. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my knees were shaking so hard I had to set the cruise control just to keep a consistent speed. I walked into my living room and locked the door behind me. I slid down against the wood, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. It was the first time in 10 years that I did not feel the invisible noose of family obligation tightening around my throat. I had cut the rope, but the phantom burn remained. I slept for 12 hours and woke up to a digital nightmare. My phone had turned into a brick of notifications. I opened Facebook and saw it immediately. Kendra had been busy. At 3 a.m, she had posted a long, rambling status update. Heartbroken, to see a child struggle with mental health and substance issues. It read, "We tried to intervene with love, but addiction makes people paranoid. Please pray for Brittany as she battles her demons." Below the text was a blurry photo of me from 3 years ago at a wedding, holding a glass of champagne, looking red-eyed from a camera flash. She had cropped it to make me look disheveled, unhinged. The comments were a cesspool. Some cousins had posted praying hands emojis. Others, the ones who had been at the party, stayed silent. But then the private messages started rolling in. "Family business stays in the family. Brittany," my Aunt Linda texted. "You humiliated your father. Fix this." "I'm not fixing anything," I said to the empty room, deleting the thread. I went to the kitchen to make coffee and grabbed the mail I had ignored yesterday. Buried under a flyer for pizza was a letter from a credit card company I had never banked with. I ripped it open. It was a statement for a platinum rewards card. The balance was $4,250. I stared at the transaction list. Electronics store, online gambling sites, a liquor store in my father's zip code. I called the number on the back of the statement immediately. "I need to know the billing address on this account," I told the representative, my voice raspy from sleep. "It is listed as P.O. Box 492 in Pine Creek," the agent replied. I thanked him and hung up. I did a quick search on the public postal registry. The box was not registered to Wade or Kendra. It was registered to Miles Hale. My phone rang. It was Miles. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment before swiping green. "Brittany." His voice was wet, thick with mucus. "Brittany, please, you have to listen to me." "I am listening to the sound of $4,000 of debt, Miles," I said coldly. "She made me do it." He sobbed. "Mom, she said she needed a bridge loan until Dad's commission came in. She said you wouldn't mind because you have a good job. I didn't know she was going to max it out. You rented the P.O. box, Miles. You committed mail fraud." "I was scared," he wailed. "If I say no to her, you know how she gets. She freezes me out. She cuts off my car payments. I didn't have a choice." "We always have a choice," I said. "And you chose to steal from your sister instead of standing up to your mother. Brittany, please, don't call the police. I can't go to jail. I'm barely holding it together as it is." I felt a pang of pity. Miles was 25, but emotionally, he was still a child cowering in the corner while Kendra threw plates. But pity was a luxury I could not afford. Pity was how they got the first $20,000 out of me. "I'm sorry, Miles," I said, "but I am done setting myself on fire to keep you all warm." I hung up on his sobbing. I spent the next 2 hours in a fury of administrative violence. I filed an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. I called the credit card company and flagged the account as fraudulent, providing the police report number I had generated online. Then I drafted a formal cease and desist letter addressed to Wade, Kendra, and Miles, demanding zero contact and the immediate return of any other documents they possessed. But I had one last arrow to fire. I compiled everything into a single PDF file: the credit card statement, the P.O. box registry with Miles's name, and the text logs. I attached it to a text message to my father. "Dad," I typed, "I know Kendra is telling you I am crazy. Look at the attachment. This is a felony. I am filing the police report tomorrow morning. You have to decide right now. Do you choose the truth, or do you choose the woman who is using you as a human shield?" I hit send. The day dragged on. The sun went down. I sat on my balcony, watching the streetlights flicker on, waiting. At exactly midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a single text from Wade. "You do not know the real big thing yet." I met my father at a crowded coffee shop halfway between the coast and his suburb. I chose the location deliberately. It was public, noisy, and neutral ground where Kendra could not ambush us without witnesses. When Wade walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. In just 7 days, he had aged 10 years. His shoulders were slumped, his skin was gray and papery, and he wore a stained polo shirt that the meticulous Wade Hale of my childhood would have burned. He sat down across from me, refusing to make eye contact. He ordered a black coffee and wrapped his hands around the mug for warmth. "You look terrible, Dad," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "I haven't slept," he rasped. She is on a warpath. She knows you filed the report." "Good," I said. "Then she knows I am serious. Now tell me what the real big thing is." Wade flinched. He took a sip of coffee, his hand shaking so badly a drop spilled onto the table. "It started 2 years ago," he whispered, leaning in. "The house. It was too expensive. We were drowning. Kendra took over the finances because I couldn't look at the numbers anymore without having a panic attack. She said she had a way to fix it, to leverage family assets. I thought she meant asking your aunt for a loan." "She meant stealing my identity," I said. "She called it borrowing," Wade said, his voice cracking. "She said she would pay it back before anyone noticed. Just opening a line of credit here, a small loan there, but then—" He stopped, looking around the cafe as if expecting Kendra to pop out from behind the espresso machine. "Then she made me sign the new will." I frowned. "A will you are healthy, Dad. Why a new will?" "She has a file. Brittany," he said, tears leaking from his eyes. "In the garage cabinet. It has your original birth certificate, your social security card, everything from when you were a baby, and the will. It names her as the executor of my estate, obviously, but it also includes a clause about family debt consolidation. She set it up so that if I die, the debts she racked up in my name and yours become a shared liability of the estate. She wants to bind you to her debt forever." I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just about quick cash. It was an insurance policy. She was building a future where I would be legally shackled to her financial ruin for the rest of my life. "I need that file," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I can't give it to you," Wade whimpered. "She counts the pages every night. She is paranoid." "Then help me," I said. "If you help me get that file legally, I won't name you as a co-conspirator in the fraud lawsuit. I will say you were under duress. But if you protect her, you go down with her." Wade looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. He saw the daughter he had neglected, the leftover he had allowed his wife to consume. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver key. He slid it across the table under his napkin. "This is the spare key to the metal cabinet in the garage. She thinks I lost it last year." I put my hand over the napkin and palmed the key. The metal was warm from his pocket. "Thank you," I said. "Are you going to go there now?" he asked, terror in his eyes. "Brittany, if she catches you—" "I am not breaking in, Dad," I said, standing up. "I am done playing by her rules." I walked out of the cafe and called Marcus, my lawyer, from the car. "I have probable cause," I told him. "My father just confirmed there is a cache of stolen identity documents in a locked cabinet at their residence. I do not want to sneak in. I want a court order. I want a sheriff to open that door while she watches. I can get an emergency preservation order by tomorrow morning," Marcus said. "Sit tight. Brittany, do not go near that house." I drove home feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. I had the key, literally and figuratively. But when I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with an alert from my security system. It was a text from Tessa. "Do not freak out, but check your camera log from 2 hours ago." I opened the app. The video loaded. It showed my front porch in broad daylight. A car pulled up, a silver sedan I recognized immediately. Kendra got out. She was wearing large sunglasses and a trench coat. She walked up the path, but she didn't ring the doorbell. She didn't knock. She just stood there. For 5 long minutes, she stared directly into the camera lens, her face impassive, motionless. She was not looking for me. She was studying the lock. She was checking the windows. She turned around, surveyed the street, and then walked back to her car and drove away. She was not waiting for me to make a mistake. She was preparing to make her own move. The summons came at dawn via a group text. It was labeled Emergency Family Meeting and dictated a time and location, the Oak Room, a pretentious bistro downtown at 11 o'clock. Kendra wanted to end this, but she wanted to do it on her terms, over linen tablecloths where she assumed I would be too polite to cause a scene. She was wrong. I agreed to the meeting, but I did not go alone. I arrived 5 minutes early, wearing my sharpest blazer. Marcus, my lawyer, walked in 2 minutes later and took a seat 3 tables away, ordering an iced tea and placing his briefcase on the floor. I sat down opposite Wade and Kendra. My father looked like a ghost, his skin pale and clammy. Kendra, however, was composed, her hands folded on the table like she was presiding over a board meeting. "Brittany," Kendra began, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet maternal tone she used when she wanted something. "We are here because things have gotten out of hand. You have been acting very erratically, and frankly, it is ungrateful. After everything we did to raise you, to support you when you were struggling, this is how you repay us with police reports?" "I am not here for a lecture, Kendra," I said, placing my phone face down on the table. "It is not a lecture, sweetie," she purred, reaching into her purse. "It is a solution. We drafted an agreement. A way for you to pay back the family for the emotional distress and the financial support we provided over the years." She slid a thick envelope across the table. I opened it. It was a contract titled Family Support Stipulation. It outlined a binding agreement where I would voluntarily transfer 20% of my monthly income to a joint account managed by Kendra for reimbursement of historical child-rearing expenses. I stared at the paper. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to legalize her theft. "You want me to sign this?" I asked, looking up. "It is the right thing to do," Kendra said, her eyes hard. "Sign it. Drop the silly investigation, and we can be a family again." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. The volume was all the way up. Ping. The sound of the text message notification cut through the quiet restaurant air. Then, the screen recording played. "Heat up the leftovers." Wade flinched as if he had been slapped. Kendra stiffened. "I will sign it," I said softly. Kendra's eyes lit up with triumph. "Good. I knew you would be reasonable." "I will sign it," I repeated, reaching into my bag and pulling out a different document. "If you can prove to me that this signature is mine." I slammed the forensic handwriting analysis report onto the table. It was a high-resolution comparison of the bank authorization form she had forged versus my actual signature. Red arrows pointed out the hesitation marks, the incorrect pressure points, and the digital traces of a tracing overlay. "This is a preliminary analysis from a forensic document examiner," I said, my voice rising just enough to carry. "It concludes with 99% certainty that the signature authorizing you to access my accounts was a forgery." Kendra's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And just so we are clear," I continued, signaling with my hand. Marcus stood up from his table. He walked over, buttoning his suit jacket, and placed a business card on the table in front of Kendra. "Ms. Hale," Marcus said, his voice deep and professional. "I am Marcus Dean, representing Brittany Hale. We have already filed the fraud reports with the Federal Trade Commission and the local precinct. We have placed a freeze on all credit bureaus. Furthermore, any attempt to contact my client outside of legal counsel from this moment forward will be added to the harassment suit." The color drained from Kendra's face. She looked at the contract, then at Marcus, then at me. The trap had snapped shut, and she was the one inside it. "Brittany," Wade choked out. He was weeping now, ugly, gasping sobs that drew stares from the other diners. Please, please, stop. You are destroying us. I can't take this. I looked at my father. I felt a twinge of pain, but I crushed it. He had watched her sharpen the knife for years and done nothing. I do not need you to suffer. Dad, I said, leaning in. I need you to tell the truth. That is the only thing that saves you now. Kendra stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She grabbed her purse, her composure fracturing into panic. I am leaving, she hissed. I do not have to listen to this insanity. If you walk out that door, I said, my voice anchoring her to the spot. Tomorrow morning, the entire file goes to the district attorney. The video of you holding Dad's phone, the IP logs from your house, accessing my email, the credit card usage at the liquor store, everything. Kendra froze. She turned back to look at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. I was not the leftovers anymore. I was the one holding the carving knife. You are bluffing, Kendra scoffed, though her hand gripped her purse strap so tightly her knuckles were white. You would not send your own father to prison. Try me, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the final stack of documents. I laid them out like tarot cards, predicting her doom. First, the IP logs matching the login on my old email to the Wi-Fi router in her living room. Second, the time-stamped HR change request. Third, the credit card application for the account Miles had opened, which listed her cell phone number as the secondary verification contact. All roads led to Kendra. These are not bluffs. Kendra, I said, my voice steady. These are breadcrumbs, and I followed them all the way to your door. She opened her mouth to argue, to spin another lie, but I cut her off. I pressed play on my phone again. This time, it was not the video from Christmas. It was the audio recording from the coffee shop yesterday, recorded legally in a one-party consent state. Wade's voice filled the space between us, tinny but unmistakable. She has a file in the garage cabinet. She wants to bind you to her debt forever. Kendra froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking haggard and exposed. She whipped her head around to glare at Wade. You told her, she hissed, her voice vibrating with rage. You weak, pathetic old man, after I saved you from bankruptcy, after I fixed your mess. You did not fix it, Kendra, Wade whispered, staring at the tablecloth. You just stole from my daughter to cover the holes. I did what had to be done, Kendra screamed, slamming her hand on the table. The silverware clattered. The entire restaurant fell silent. Diners turned in their seats. The facade of the polite, suburban stepmother shattered, revealing the desperate grifter underneath. She has plenty of money. She is family. It is her duty to share. It is not my duty to be your victim, I said calmly. Marcus slid a single sheet of paper across the table. This is a formal admission of guilt, Marcus explained. It states that you accept full liability for the fraudulent loans and that you agree to a permanent restraining order. You will return all of Brittany's personal documents immediately. If you sign this, Brittany agrees to withhold the criminal filing for now, pending your repayment of the debt. If you walk out without signing, the police are waiting in the parking lot. Kendra looked at the door. Then she looked at the paper. She was trapped. With a shaking hand, she snatched the pen and scribbled her name. She threw the pen down and stormed out, shoving a waiter aside as she fled the ruins of her control. Wade did not move. He sat there, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. Sorry for what, Dad? I asked. For stealing from me or for getting caught? He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I used you as a shield. Brittany. Too much of a coward to tell her no, so I let her take from you because I knew you were strong enough to survive it. I made you a cushion for my falls. I was wrong. It was the truth. It was ugly, and it hurt. But it was finally real. I accept your apology, I said, but I am keeping the restraining order. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Miles. He had sent a photo of a cardboard box sitting on a desk in Marcus's law office. I dropped the file off. All of it. Don't tell Mom. I'm moving out tonight. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since Christmas Eve. It was over. The HR department had already confirmed my account was secure. The bank had processed the fraud claim. My credit was locked down tight. I stood up and looked at my father one last time. I am not leftovers, Dad, I said. I am the main course, and from now on, I am the only one who decides who gets a seat at my table. I turned and walked out of the restaurant. The air outside was biting cold, sharp and clean against my face. The streetlights were just starting to hum to life, casting long, golden shadows on the pavement. My phone was in my pocket, silent. No texts demanding my time, no guilt trips, no notifications of stolen money. For the first time in my life, the silence was not an absence of noise. It was the presence of freedom. I unlocked my car, got in, and when the thought crossed my mind to call them and check if they were okay, I answered myself with the only word that mattered: no. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you guys are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this takedown, please smash that like button, hit the hype button to help the algorithm push this story to more people, and do not forget to subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories for more satisfying justice. See you in the next one.